Greetings from Mazatlan. I'm on a cruise ship at the moment. 2 days before the ship was supposed to depart, I was in the emergency room getting IV antibiotics for a bacterial infection in my leg that was spreading down my leg. I got it while I was training jiu-jitsu down in Costa Rica the week earlier, so I thought it would be informative to talk about all the ways that jiu-jitsu can hurt you. Let's talk about it. Introducing the BJJ Old Guy Ultimate Bundle. 3 courses, over 7 hours of material. To commemorate the 3-year anniversary of the Art of Skill channel on YouTube, I'm offering the bundle for 60% off. And if you use coupon code OLDGUY, you'll get an extra 10% off. That's crazy! Just visit rickellis.com and look for the BJJ Old Guy Ultimate Bundle. So I was down in Costa Rica a week ago training jiu-jitsu at Hero BJJ. Amazing retreat, well run, really amazing. And I don't know for sure that I got the infection on the mats. It could have been a bug bite that got infected. It could have been a combination, a bug bite that got infected or a bug bite that then was exacerbated by being on the mat. I did something like 6 or 7 training sessions in 5 days, which is a lot, especially when you're old. I was pretty beat up. But I broke the cardinal rule that I've had for myself for the last 10 years. What's that rule? On no-gi training days, I cover up as much of my body as possible. That means long sleeves, rash guards, and leggings, spats. I also got an abrasion on my elbow while I was down there, but I was wearing a long sleeve rash guard the whole time and didn't get infected. It was totally fine. So I have no way of knowing if I would have gotten the infection in my knee regardless, but I think it would have made it less likely had I covered up my body. I sell rash guards over at artofskillgear.com, and they're pretty nice rash guards. I don't sell short sleeve rash guards. I've had some requests for them, but the reason I don't sell them is because I'm a believer in you got to cover up as much as possible, because skin infections can happen. They do happen. It can be something like ringworm, which is fairly innocuous, although it is contagious. I've had ringworm many times. Usually it's on the back of my head because you're on the mat, laying down, playing guard. And what's the solution to that? Well, the solution is usually something like Lotrimin or Lotrimin Ultra is what I use. I always keep a tube of it. Also, tea tree oil. When you get home, you bathe, you wash all of the exposed areas on your body with tea tree oil to help as a preventative. But ringworm's not a big deal. Things like staph infection can be life-threatening, and they can progress incredibly fast. As it turned out, I didn't have staph infection. I had something called cellulitis. Cellulitis is a bacterial infection of the skin. So I ended up having a little wound below my knee. It could have been a bug bite. It could have been someone's fingernail. It could have been who knows. And it got infected. I put antibiotic ointment on it. It went away. But when I got back from Costa Rica the next day, my knee started swelling up and it started hurting. That was the morning. By that evening, I was in the ER because it had progressed lower in my leg. My foot was starting to swell up, and it was incredibly painful. It felt like my skin was crawling. It felt kind of deep in my knee. I didn't know what it was. I have a friend named Al Laurimore who, many years ago, he got done training. His knee was sore, just like mine was. 2 days later, his knee was being cut open at the hospital to drain it because he had staph infection. We didn't know initially if it was staph because they have to send out the test to be cultured. It takes a few days. But the day after, a couple days after my initial visit to the ER, I was getting worse. I was running a fever. My leg was swollen. I couldn't bend my leg. It was incredibly painful. And the speed that this thing was progressing was very alarming to me. So I went back to the ER. They ran a battery of tests, and they put me on heavy IV antibiotics. I'm on 2 antibiotics still to this day. I didn't think I was getting on the ship. This was a game time decision that I made really the morning that we were supposed to get on the ship, because I woke up, my fever was gone, and my leg felt a little bit better. And I thought, okay, we're on the right trajectory. I'm going to take a calculated risk. I got evacuation insurance, because if you have to be airlifted off of a cruise ship from Mexico, it's a nightmare. And with something like staph, every hour counts. You can go septic, which means it gets into your bloodstream. You don't want to mess with that stuff. So it was a calculated risk. I feel fine right now. My stomach's messed up from the antibiotics, but I feel fine. So the first thing you need to worry about is, anytime you get an abrasion or a cut on a jiu-jitsu mat, you better clean that thing out, put some antibiotic ointment. There's a little controversy on that. Some people believe that the antibiotic ointments can kind of hold in the bacteria. So, or maybe an antiseptic spray is better in that case. But either way, you have to do something about those cuts and scrapes. Don't just let them go. Don't just go to class, train, get dressed afterward, and go about your day and shower at some point, maybe that evening later. Clean up, shower as soon as you get home from training. Clean your training gear as soon as you get home from training. That includes your belt. Got to wash our belts as well. Use vinegar periodically. Soak your training gear in vinegar to get rid of the gi funk that can happen. It smells like ammonia. We've all smelled those stinky guys with the gis that were supposed to be white, but they're actually brown, and they just have this ammonia smell. That's just them not being good training partners. Wash your stuff. Bleach your white gis. Use vinegar. Show up clean. Don't, if you work in a physical job where you're sweating, don't just go to train. Take a shower. Wash your feet before you go out. Keep your nails trimmed. Our nails have bacteria under them. A little scratch with that bacteria, and here comes an infection, and it can turn into something like cellulitis or some kind of staphylococcus infection, or there's a whole bunch of these things that can really hurt you. So the first thing that can go wrong in jiu-jitsu is you get a skin infection. And again, I'm a proponent of covering it as much of your body as possible, including your legs. That leaves your hands, your head, and your feet exposed. Use some tea tree oil, or there's a lot of these types of products on the market that can help with ringworm and those sorts of things. And check yourself out. Make sure you don't come home with an abrasion. Some people drag their feet, the tops of their feet, while they train jiu-jitsu, and they end up getting, abraded feet. Those things are perfect breeding grounds for bacteria. Take that stuff seriously. Trust me on that. What's the second thing that can be dangerous about jiu-jitsu? Well, injury, right? There's always some risk of injury in jiu-jitsu. It's a low level of risk. I mean, it's not a high risk, but there's always risk of injury. But you can make the risk higher, or you can make the risk lower. You can make the risk higher by being incredibly intense and, trying to tear your training partner's heads off, or you can dial back the intensity, try to move with more precision. There are people in jiu-jitsu that are just clumsy. There are those that move very, very precisely, and usually it's people that either have been athletes in the past. They show up to jiu-jitsu, they have a good body awareness, good body connection, they're in touch with how their body works, how it moves, and they can move with a reasonable degree of precision. But then there are other people that are just kind of clumsy. They've never done anything physical before. This is the first thing they've done. They don't have good body control, and especially when sparring, they see an opening to advance their position or an opening to grab a submission, and they just go for it with 100% intensity, and they end up injuring themselves, or they injure their training partner. So one of the things you can do to mitigate the risks, or to lessen them at least, is to choose your training partners really seriously. You don't need to train against someone who's 100 pounds heavier than you. There's a lot of risk associated with that. And you don't need to train against those guys that are your size if they're too aggressive, they're a little out of control, they don't have good body control. It's okay to tell anybody for any reason, listen, I can't train with you. I can't roll with you. You're too big for me. You're too aggressive, and listen, you're my bro. We train together. I'll go have a beer with you. I think you're awesome, but I need to protect my body.
That's perfectly fine. Be okay doing that. Don't just be, listen, if you don't advocate for your body, nobody is going to advocate for your body. So take that seriously. As your skill improves in jiu-jitsu, you develop strategies and awareness that allows you to be safer. It's sort of like when you first get your driver's license, you are the most risky in those first 3, 4, 5 years when you're a new driver. Why? Because you haven't been through all the ways in which you can get in trouble driving. You haven't dealt with those confusing intersections. You haven't had people pull in front of you. You haven't, been following that bus and merging over only to realize there's a car coming. I mean, there's a million things that can happen, but after about 4 or 5 years of driving, you've experienced those things, and now you're a better driver. Well, the same thing is true in jiu-jitsu. When you're a white belt, you haven't experienced all the oh crap moments where someone's got your leg and they're going for a submission, and better either tap or rotate out correctly to avoid a potential injury. So when you're newer at jiu-jitsu, you have to willfully be more careful. You have to go into class thinking, I'm going to be very careful with my body, and I'm going to be very careful with my training partner's body. By blue belt, purple belt, now you're starting to have a much more intuitive sense of the times that you're at risk. Me personally, safety is my number one priority, and I'm constantly monitoring what's going on in the roll. If someone, I was down in Costa Rica and someone went to footlock me, and I was able to stay ahead of it and avoid something. So you develop skill and the ability to deal with people that are heavier than you, people that are more aggressive than you over time. But in the first few years, especially if you're a little older athlete or a little slower, you're not as dynamic, you really have to protect your body. And that starts with picking your training partners carefully and monitoring how you move, trying to learn to move properly. Focus on your mobility and your movement. Practice moving. You can go on YouTube. There are tons of movement modalities. Practice them so that you can learn your body and how it works and what you're capable of better. There's a second kind of injury that is, it just happened. It was a freak occurrence. You zigged, they zagged, you collided, something happened. You can't always avoid those. I've had plenty of injuries over the years from those types of things. So there's a little bit of risk in jiu-jitsu at all times because of that. But again, we're trying to mitigate the risk to the extent that it's possible. So those are really the two things, in my opinion. There's also the issue of understanding the difference between being hurt and being injured. If you're hurt, it just means something is sore and you need to modify the way you're training. You need to modify what you're doing to let that thing heal. I've always been able to train through those types of things, sometimes more successfully, sometimes less successfully. But if you don't pay attention to those little aches and pains, what happens is they're going to fester and get worse over time. And then that sore shoulder that's been bugging you for the last 3 months turns into a torn rotator cuff. So that's the third thing that can happen, is you can have a lingering injury that you don't pay attention to. So modify how you play jiu-jitsu. If your shoulder is sore, keep your arms in. Just, it becomes mental discipline to keep yourself safe. So those are my thoughts. This is just a quick video today. Take skin issues seriously. Take your safety seriously. Wash your gear. Wash your body. Take those abrasions and cuts seriously. A little scratch that you come home with, you have no idea. It could turn into cellulitis or something even worse. So good luck to you. And I'm on a cruise ship, even though my leg still hurts, but I'm getting better. Take care.